Good morning and welcome to Felixstowe TV here at the Gainsborough studio. You join us on one of the hottest days of 2014. We have talked recently, haven't we, of Eric's wonderful Bembridge going to the delights and being looked after in Poland. I did do a download of some of the interest, and it is well worth having a quick look at www.bembridge.pl/cm.php. All of that. Just have a look.
Just Google Bembridge.
It looks good.
That's good.
And it's very informative. So, welcome, young Eric.
Hello to you.
Hello, Bella. How are you? Are you about?
I don't think she's in the picture.
Are you not in the picture?
No, she is now.
Oh,
I think.
come
There
on.
we are. Yes.
I mean, her contribution is amazing. Her ability to speak is beyond measure, isn't
Yes,
it?
there we are.
Okay, Eric. So we left it that we'd been looking to restore the harbour at Maryport in Cumbria. You'd got on a wheeze that I don't think even you were aware of, which was to pull out the gravel immediately in front of the harbour wall.
No, get this right. What we did, first of all, was I thought that because we couldn't afford dredgers.
No,
we had a harbour, a large harbour. It was one of the largest harbours in the north in its time. And there it was, semi-derelict, or completely derelict, a few odd fishermen working from it. But the difficulty was that the harbour mouth had silted up.
Yep.
And so I thought, well, we can't afford dredgers.
No.
What do we do? So I suddenly had this brainwave, and helped by one or two advice, I go around and pick up advice.
Yes.
And somebody suggested to me, why don't you dig a hole just beside, on the other side of the pier, so to speak, and maybe the silt and the dirt from the harbour entrance will go into that.
Right.
So I thought, what a good idea. So I went to a local haulier, and he had a digger, and lorries, obviously. So he filled up about a dozen or 15 lorries of shingle or gravel, actually, from this next to the pier, and blow me down. It had a big hole, and I thought, well, that's it for now. We'll see what happens. The next day, it was full of gravel again.
Yes, and we did all this, and that's ended up in the M6.
And that ended up in the M6. So not only did we solve the harbour entrance, actually it didn't do the harbour entrance an enormous amount of good.
No.
It went down a little bit, but that gravel was coming from somewhere else.
Yeah, all the time.
So it was very good, because there we had income.
Yes.
And of course, as you know, most things you need income to do things with.
You do indeed, you do.
And there we had a ready source of income, because there was that gravel.
Just go and grab it.
Just go and fill up, take it out of the hole, and he built huge stocks, which we sold, obviously. So it was a very good enterprise, that would. So we had finance to do things with.
Good, right.
So with that finance, Maryport, of course, was in those days, from being one of the major places in the north of England, it had come down to practically nothing. It was derelict. People were out of work. There was no employment, no industries.
So where are we? The 60s? 70s?
This was 70s.
In the 70s, right.
So first of all, I thought the first thing we must do is to do the seafront, the sea defences and what have you.
Oh, right.
So we applied to the government, and we got a grant, I think £250,000, which was in those days was a lot of money.
Oh, right.
So I think we covered this last time.
You did briefly.
We started employing people, and this is when I was first aware that men wouldn't come. They could get £70. I'm sorry, I think it was £50 on the benefit, and we were offering £70 a week. So they said, we're not going to work for £20.
Yes, we did. We went over that.
And, but of course, we got the people who really did.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate, because, as you know, we had Arundel Priory. We brought up our huge family, and I had so many members of family who came up and helped.
That was brilliant.
We had my son Nicholas and his lovely wife came up and ran the restaurant in Harbour House, which we bought this huge building, Harbour House, and we restored it because it was semi-derelict. We got it for virtually very little money, and so he ran the restaurant and the club in there.
Yeah.
And then I had another son. I started a local newspaper, so I can honestly say I've owned a newspaper
yes.
in my day.
You could have been the English Murdoch.
Well, I never carry on with things long enough to do anything. But no, that was the Maryport Gazette.
Right.
And I had a wonderful editor, Herbert Jackson, and I think I mentioned it last time.
Yes, you did. Local businessman never missed a trick.
And he always had his picture on every page. But Christopher used to go out and sell the advertising space. So once again, we had something else, served a double purpose. It covered itself financially.
Good.
And of course, it gave people news of what we were doing. Because if people know what you're doing, this is a great, great help. Mm. And the other major thing which we did, of course, I think I told it last time, I did research and we restarted the Harbour Commissioners.
Yes, indeed,
you've got
very good. Yes,
and so that enabled us then. I think I told you how
the
harbour had been full of literally hundreds of thousands of tons of coal, which the coal board was storing there free of charge.
For free, yeah.
So I sent them an invoice.
You did,
and they had it cleared within a month, hundreds of thousands. Unfortunately, it upset somebody else.
Yes,
because where they put the coal was it wasn't a very good spot. No. But that's people must look at the previous issue if they want to see that. Mm. But so Maryport started the wheels turning, and because we had a bit of finance, as I say, I bought several a shop on the corner where I had I think Christopher and his wife set up an antique shop in one of the shops.
Did she really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
magic.
I bought this row of houses for virtually nothing. And it reminds me that there was this other man, he bought a whole street of houses at £10 each.
What, per house?
£10 per house.
Dear me, it makes Monopoly sound quite believable, doesn't it?
Well,
really?
This happened all over England.
Yes, it did.
You see, in Brighton, for instance, during the war, because obviously people were worried there was going to be an invasion.
Absolutely.
And Brighton was front line.
Yeah.
And I know somebody who bought a row of boarding houses, you know, those big hotels. He bought those at £10 a house.
You're kidding.
Or was it £100? But virtually nothing, you know. And look what they're worth today. They're
Don't
probably
even
worth
go there,
millions each one. You know.
Don't go there.
But anyway, this is the thing. But anyway, we helped to bring Maryport
back life.
Onto the. We were the seed which started it off, and we had Netherhall, which, as I said, I think I told you last time. The whole thing, fortunately, the Lord of the Manor at Netherhall, he owned all the docks or had control of the docks.
Right.
And he used to control the whole town. But I came to this arrangement with him, a lovely man and his wife. And in fact, it's one of the best marriage arrangements I've ever come across, because he and his wife used to go on holiday with his friend and his wife.
Yes.
And then they had 4 children, I think 2 children each.
Oh, right.
And this is a lovely arrangement, and they fell in with each other's wives.
You said that you had a
and
reverse.
So in effect, they changed wives, but they did it. You know, they divorced each other and got married, and the children weren't upset because they were so used to.
Were they know of each?
I don't know. They're a lovely family, and as I say, I hope that
things are going on.
Well, I think we get a Christmas card still from him, so he's a lovely man.
But he was what, a sleeping partner?
Well, he just left. What I did, I financed it, and in return for having half of everything, I think it was. I can't remember the exact.
But he was a London stockbroker.
He was a London stockbroker.
So he really was an absentee landlord, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But the house, Netherhall, was a huge mansion, and unfortunately parts of it were left. And I restored part of it and put new roof on it and everything. Right. And then just shows you stealing and what's it. One night, these thieves came. They took all the slates, all the it's off the part I'd done, and it was all gone. And it was so we had no alternative really but to demolish it. But we did the lodge up, and there was a folly in the garden which we did up, and so it was quite good. And I had once again, I think my wife's sister's husband. They came up and they were helping up. So we had all the family. People.
It sounds like the tribe of Foti took over Cumbria.
Well, we didn't, my dear, but we helped to put it in the right direction.
Well, it sounds that way.
But
what I'm really interested, we did suggest perhaps at some point in our lives we should get back up there and look at what happened to Harbour House.
Well,
because that building must still be there.
Oh yes,
and we did, I think, give an invite to anybody living there to contact us. Let us know what it's doing.
Yes, yes.
We haven't heard it. Well, I don't know. But I haven't talked to admin this morning.
It was a very.
So we'll have to see next week.
It was a very big building, as I say. We had the restaurant on the ground floor, a very nice restaurant, and then on the first floor we had a club, which was I can't remember what we called it, but it was a naval club, so that people who were interested in the sea could come.
Yes.
And then on the top floor I had a flat for myself and all the storage.
Brilliant.
So it was very good. But it took us a long time to get.
It does.
We had 15 loads of furniture to get, because Arundel Priory had 70 rooms. So you imagine a house with 70 rooms to clear out.
A lot of lifting and heaving and
people don't realise it. And just the size of Arundel Priory, the hall, which we used to use for family, is today a theatre. So that's just the hall.
I know.
So it just shows you that was why we had so much trouble in getting things up there. But at the same time, as I say, as I was doing all of that, we had the sea school tailing down. We had the vessel on the Thames, which was great because I used to take groups, every 2 or 3 weeks I'd take a group of youngsters across the channel to France.
Yes.
And this was where I found out about wine, which might be a useful tip.
Indeed.
Because wine always gives me a bad back.
Does it?
Red wine, believe me.
No.
No, let me tell you the story of it. I found that when we went there and we bought the really cheap wine, because if you go alongside and you just want a bottle of wine, you buy the cheapest. It's like our cider, they make it to be drunk immediately. Now that wine didn't give me any problems at all.
Oh, amazing.
But then I found out, so I investigated and I found what they do, they put preservative in the wines which we get, our sort of middle and lower range wines.
Yes.
They put preservative in them, and that is what affects your kidneys.
Really?
So sometimes if wine disagrees with you, it's not that, it's what they're putting in it. And I don't think you have to put the ingredients in wine.
No.
So there you are. But if you buy a really good wine, of course, which has been aged in the cellar and all the rest of it, that has no preservatives and that won't affect you.
Oh,
so you've either got to go very cheap or very dear.
Did you hear that, listener? If you suffer with back pain, I never have actually, drinking anything, wine or, but obviously some of you are susceptible to back pain from wine and its preservatives. So very cheap or very expensive?
Very cheap or very expensive.
And in these times of austerity, I think I know which one you're going for. Right, onwards.
But at any rate, so there we were getting all of this sorted out. We were living at Harbour House, and of course at this articulated lorry, you remember I got my HGV, and as I say, I'm very pleased because I had my master's ticket in the Navy, or the Admiralty Ferry Crew Association, and I had my HGV for the road, which is the highest license you can get. And of course, at the age of 80, I started flying, and I got my pilot's license at the age of 83.
Good man.
So I've had the certificate in all of them.
So you're safe on sea, land, and air.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I'm only just saying that everybody has got the opportunity, and there's great fun to be had in the air, on the road, or at sea. So we're surrounded by pleasures. It's what we've got to do.
Absolutely.
But coming back to the story, at the same time as this, it was very shortly after this, I was having trouble, and I had to have a small operation. And I went in for this operation in the hospital near Tooting Bec. I can't remember what the name of the hospital. But there's where I found the first experience of the National Health Service. Right. And they'd got rid of the matrons.
What, at that point?
At that point. Now, with this operation I'd had, I had to have I had to take the dressings off myself. Right. And they said, well, have a bath, take the dressings off, and just leave them on the side. They'd be cleared away. So I took them off, went to the bathroom, took them off, left them on the side. 3 days later, the dressings were still there. So, and this thing was amusing. I think they've got it under control now. But as patients, we used to go to look at television, but of course the cleaning staff were all sitting around looking at the television.
Really?
So, but I think that's all improved now. I think they've had a lot of teething troubles.
Well, the MRSA caused cleaning to be approached with a completely different
was it? Oh, well,
perspective, and now I think you'll find we probably got more cleaners than nurses.
But when I came out from the hospital, I thought to myself, well, I've got to rest up for, I think, a couple of months. I thought, well, I'm going to research my family. As you know, my name is Sinjin Family.
Yes.
And I've always had in our hall at home with my father, and I've always had it still got it in the hall at home now,
right.
You know, the coat of arms up. But I always took it for granted, you know, that we had coat of arms. There was a Sinjin coat of arms and a Foti coat of arms.
Yes.
So, but I knew nothing about it, you just took it for granted.
Well, you just accept it, don't you?
So I thought, well, here's an opportunity to research what my family...
Where you came from.
And anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And everybody's got an interesting family. It's a good thing to try and do, in actual fact. People have got wonderful things in their history. So I thought, well, I'll take the Foti first.
Right.
So I started doing a bit of research, and I found, of course, it's a Sicilian family.
Ah, Napoleon's
and,
friends.
And I'd known all along, you see, Mussolini cancelled all titles in Italy. This was in in the 30s, I think, or 40s. And I'd always known that we had a title, but we never used it, and my father never used it, but it was there. And my father used to tell me lovely stories about in the orchard in Sicily, how the family treasure buried in the orchard in Italy.
I love it.
And I've never been to Sicily, but I thought, well, I'm going to look it up and find out, because a buried treasure in...
I love it, yeah.
And of course, but then of course I found the difficulty of researching the Foti family was the distance.
Absolutely.
I said, what a silly fool I am. There am I. The Sinjins was obviously English. Because in those days, this is going back Victorian days, if two big families got married, they kept both names and put a hyphen. This is why it's Sinjin Foti.
Yes.
So of course I thought, well, here it is on my doorstep. It's much easier to do. So I started looking into the Sinjin side.
Right.
And there, straight away, as soon as by a bit of luck, I found out that there was a Sinjin School in Battersea.
Oh, right.
And the old family estate one of the old family estates used to be in Battersea, the whole of Battersea.
Right.
And I discovered that the Sinjin School had been founded by a member of the family, and somebody said, you must go along and see the chapel.
Absolutely.
You know, the church next to where the school is. So I went along, and there...
Hundreds of them.
Sinjins everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
And this window, the east window, was a picture of a Sinjin lady, and saying that she was a grandmother to Henry VII. That means she was a great-grandmother to Henry VIII.
Yes.
I thought, well, there she was. And it's all in glass stained. So I thought, well, it must be accurate. So at any rate, to cut a long story short, I thought, well, I'm going to research this. And I discovered that the Sinjins came from Normandy.
With William.
With William the Conqueror, and that even before the conquest in 1066, in 1045, and Oliver Sinjin had gone with William, who wasn't called the Conqueror then, I can't remember what his title was, but he'd gone to Rouen and placed a petition on the high altar at Rouen together. And at any rate, once again, to cut a long story short, the Sinjins worked with William the Conqueror, and there was Oliver and another brother. They came with the conquest, and I think it was Oliver who helped to conquer Wales, and as a reward he was given Fonmon Castle, which is still there. And when I went there many years later, and they've still got the Sinjin coat of arms over the castle door, which is nice.
Isn't that good?
And there's only been about 5 owners, I think, since the Sinjin.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful thing. But having got enthused about this, I thought, well, this is fascinating. Let me see what we can find out, you know, what happened afterwards. And then I found that there were 2 main branches of the Sinjin family, and one was at Bletsoe in Bedfordshire, and one in Swindon near Lydia Goos. I was then introduced to one of the masters of the Sinjin College, and there's he doing research into the Sinjin family. So I didn't have to do anything. It was all presented to me on a plate.
Yeah, lovely.
And he was a lovely man.
Yes.
He's dead now, unfortunately. But he helped me so much. And he said, well, there's a stroke of luck. You're looking for some, you know, because I wanted to find a nice property down in the south, because we'd given up the Arundel Priory.
Yes.
And Harbour House was only a temporary thing, and Maryport was just a venture.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I'd like
Big
to.
venture.
What about trying to get back this link, you know?
Ah, right.
And he said, in Peterborough, there's a lovely mansion there called Thorp Hall,
right,
which was built by an Oliver St. John, who was Lord Chief Justice to Cromwell.
Wow.
So this triggered me off again.
Yeah,
you know,
I bet it did.
I thought,
yes.
well, it's Lord Chief Justice to Cromwell, he must have been someone. So I started investigating it, and I found that Thorp Hall was empty. It had been a hospital for, I think, nearly 50 years or 100 years.
Really?
And it had been closed down because the building wasn't up to the standard required for a hospital.
Right.
And it was available. So I went up and looked at it, and I negotiated. It was owned by the council.
Was it?
So I started looking into it. I thought, well, this is make a lovely base for me. Thorp Hall is a lovely mansion. And I found that this Oliver St. John, he had gone to Holland. He was the ambassador for Holland.
Mm.
And he had discovered that Peterborough Cathedral was about to be pulled down.
By who?
Well, the Roundheads.
You're kidding.
Not
right,
not the Roundhead, Cromwell and his crew.
Yes.
And there was a decree in Parliament, I think on the 14th of July, and I can't remember the year, 16-something, which said that Peterborough Cathedral will be pulled down, and,
That would be. Well, they were quite sacrilegious, weren't they?
So what? Because they didn't like statues.
No,
and
no, but
and
I
it was a
mean,
bit
a whole
elaborate,
cathedral was going
that was going to be pulled down.
Right.
So he got in touch because he thought, well, I'd like to settle in Peterborough.
Mm.
And so he got in touch with the, I presume the government or who it was.
Mm.
He said, in exchange, I won't take any wages for my work, as ambassador.
Right.
He said, instead of that, leave Peterborough Cathedral for the people of Peterborough.
Oh, really?
So it was a St. John who's responsible for Peterborough Cathedral still being there today, which is a nice, interesting bit of history.
Well, certainly if we've got viewers who are in and around Peterborough, Eric's forefathers are responsible for ensuring you still got your one, and it is a lovely cathedral.
But I think there was a bit of self-interest there as well.
Always is.
Because the Bishop's Palace was, of course, demolished,
yes.
and he used the stone from the Bishop's Palace to build Thorp Hall. There's always wheels.
It comes around, goes around.
It goes around. But he built Thorp Hall, and in actual fact, it was. I thought, well, this would be an ideal spot. I went over it. Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. I found that the panelling from one room had been taken away. I got in touch with the people who'd had it, and they were willing to give it back, the panelling.
Really?
And I don't know, I did a lot of work on it, and I found that the other branch of the family was at Lydia Goos, which is a mansion, a big mansion near Swindon.
Right.
Where you've been recently, I think.
Sadly, but people of Swindon are very helpful.
Don't take my mind off it. Lydia Goos, there's a big mansion there, so I went down to see Lydia Goos. Right. And that, of course, had been turned into a museum. And it was open to the public. Next to Lydia Goos was a lovely chapel. Right. And the whole of the, where the high altar is, the whole of that side, the whole building was the genealogical table of the Sinjin family. And it still is, so if you go back to Swindon,
well, I will,
just go into that chapel near Lydia Goos and you'll see the whole of the genealogical table up to about 1600, and it takes a whole wall to do it.
Isn't that nice?
So it's very nice. So, but I thought, well, I could do the same thing with Thorp Hall.
Yes.
We could live in it, it could be a museum and preserve this lovely, because in Thorp Hall, over the fireplace, there's a huge coat of arms that has been painted over. Oh, right. And it was all visible, and the town council didn't even know what it was. It was the Sinjin coat of arms, of course. So it shows you how. So
you were coming home, really, weren't you?
Well, let me carry on with the story. So I thought, well, at that time I put a proposal to the council for Lydia Goos, and I think it was around about £250,000, which was a lot of money in those days. And so I went and did a presentation in front of the whole council. I've still got a copy of the thing I distributed to them all. And then I took a whole coachload of them down to Lydia Goos to show it to them. Right. And to say, well, this is what I'm planning to do with Thorp Hall. Right. And everybody was very enthusiastic. But then came the big stumbling block, money.
Oh, yeah.
And what it was there was a group of businessmen in Peterborough, and they thought, well, Thorp Hall would make a wonderful casino.
Oh, yes.
So they put up a proposal for £2 million.
Really? Oh dear.
And so you know what councils are like,
oh,
and
yeah.
they tell you...
Well, they're obliged to take the highest.
Their mind goes just a few extra noughts and £250,000 against £2 million.
Yeah.
So they politely said no to me and yes to the casino. So I'll come back to that casino in 2 minutes. But that made me think, well, this is the part of the world where I'd like to be.
Right.
Because, you see, Oliver Sinjin, he was part of the group, they were called the Adventurers.
Right.
And they brought over, what was his name, the Dutchman's name, I can't remember.
William.
No, Vermeulen.
Oh, right.
To drain the fens. So my ancestor was responsible for draining the fens. He was one of the adventurers. He was also responsible for sending the first settlers over to America.
Oh, right.
Which is interesting.
Yes.
And because he not only started the, how shall I say, the settlement in America,
yes,
but he ended our association with America because he made the act, I can't remember what it was, where all the things had to be transported by British boats.
Yes.
And that led to the Tea Party in Boston.
And the duties,
and so he, Oliver St. John,
was a part of the revolt.
Part of the start-up and part of the ending, because he caused the Boston Tea Party. In fact, some years ago, I sent over a nice big manuscript. They had a big reunion or something.
Yes,
for the
he
Boston
did.
Tea Party,
Jamestown did a thing.
and I sent them over this thing, telling all about it. It was read out in great at the Boston Boston. But anyway, to come back to the story. There was I had this opportunity to get Thorp Hall, and it finished. So I looked around and I thought, well, it'd be nice to settle in this part of the world. So we did a tour round. East Anglia, and of course Vermeulen had drained the fens. So there was one of my ancestors who had been responsible for all this lovely countryside.
Yes.
And of course you've got to remember they didn't do this from an altruistic point of view.
There was a profit to be made.
For every acre they settled or drained, they got an acre.
That's not bad, then.
It's not bad.
No, it's not.
But people don't realise this.
Yeah, but nevertheless, there are acres we wouldn't have had at all.
Well, this is it. So basically, but coming back to that casino, just to finish that little chapter, unfortunately the casino people hadn't done the research that I had done, and their bid fell through because the building wasn't suitable for what their purpose. I had adopted my, how shall I say, my proposals to the building.
Yes.
They had
tried to force it on it
the other way, and it wouldn't work. So then it went to the big charity, I can't remember the name now, and for many years they had an annual fete, and I used to go every year and give a lecture on the Sinjin family in this association.
Right.
But that's it, but I'm afraid we're coming
up
to...
Well, we've got a minute or two to finish up. So what we've done today, folks, we haven't actually dealt with Eric's This Is Your Life. We've been really looking back to before William the Conqueror, which is going back a bit. And those who contributed the genes that compose our 88-year young Eric.
May I finish on falcons?
Yes, I think you can. Yes, indeed you can.
Because one of my forebears up in Scotland,
right.
You see, if you ever see the Sinjin coat of arms, it's got two falcons.
Oh, right.
And at Thorp Hall, there's a falcon on the gates.
Right.
And if you go to Well Manor, which I had, there's falcons on the gates. You'll always find
falcons.
Falcons. Yes. And the reason for it was this monarch, who my ancestor had done some benefit for. He said, as a reward, you can have all the land covered by a falcon released from my wrist. He, being very cunning, he thought, well, it'll fly away and come back onto my wrist, so it won't cost me anything. But this falcon, he flew for miles and landed, so the family got vast acreage from it, so it adopted the falcon as on its coat of arms.
Well, on that really happy note as to how birds can help an estate grow to a very big size, we say goodbye from the Gainsborough studio, Felixstowe TV. Look forward to seeing you next week. Enjoy the week ahead. Look forward to seeing you at 10 sharp next Friday. Bye-bye.